It's just amazing to me how many people get scammed or ripped off or tricked into ETFs and what they actually stand for. So in this video, I'm going to solve that problem. I'm going to explain to you how to check who owns the ETF and whether they align with you, how to check the fees and whether they're fair or not, how to check the holdings of the ETF so you actually know what you're holding, and if it even makes sense to buy the ETF or just go buy the symbols you like, how to check the total assets under management to see if your portfolio fits into their bigger picture, and of course how to compare and contrast the name of the ETF to actually what it stands for. Because you'll find there are many ETFs on the market that are gimmicks, that have fancy names, that have these thematic sort of titles, but when you look at the holdings or what they stand for, it's just smoke and mirrors. So the first thing I want to dive into is checking into who owns these specific ETFs. Now on this specific chart right in front of you, I am looking at IWM, and you can see in the title, it says iShares Russell 2000 ETF. So we immediately know iShares is the company name. You can oftentimes see the name of the company that manages the ETF right in the title there. Now that you know who manages the ETF, the name of the ETF, the symbol of the ETF, you can go to any search engine, type that information in, and end up on the home page for that specific ETF. So I went to Google, I typed in iShares IWM ETF, and I found their official landing page for this ETF, and it looks just like this. Now, what I want to say here are the key things you must understand about this symbol page. The first thing, and I love this about these types of pages, is look how far down the page they bury the fees. So we're going to just scroll, and we're going to keep scrolling, and we're going to keep scrolling. We found it. So we had to get halfway, a little more than halfway down the page before we could actually see the fees of this ETF. Now, naturally, no ETF wants to tell you the fees. In fact, most ETF providers probably want you to think the ETF is free. You're in your brokerage app, you type in the ETF name, you buy it. Where's the fee? There's no fee that's mentioned, but let me tell you, there is a fee. In fact, in this case, it is 0.19%. So if I bought $100,000 worth of this ETF and I ultimately held that ETF for over a year, I would take a 0.19% fee out of my holdings and give it to this company. So that leads me to the next point of this specific ETF walkthrough. Who manages this ETF? Ask yourself, who's that company? What do they do? What do they stand for? Who are they? Do you like their work? Now, in this example, you can actually see at the top left, it says by BlackRock. I'm going to move my image here so you can see by BlackRock. So now we know that the owner of iShares in this ETF is BlackRock. Well, ask yourself, do you like BlackRock? Do you stand with who it is, who their people are? Do you know how much money its CEO makes? Or do you know what their team is made up of? Who are the people? What do they actually do? These are things you want to investigate because ultimately you are giving them your money to hold on to, and you are essentially supporting their business, their lifestyle, all of that. So if we actually go to Google, and I know that Larry Fink is the CEO of BlackRock, we can type in Larry Fink salary. And he pays himself about $27 million a year, and that is probably because so many investors just plow their money freely into many of his funds. There's not a whole lot of conversation about it. You probably heard the fancy name, saw a commercial, your financial advisor told you about it. You just dump your money into that ETF. Every year, he takes a fee, him and his company. He collects a cool $27 million a year. He's probably made a lot more than that too in some of the booming years. The point here, though, is that this is the level of research people should be doing into ETFs before just throwing their money into them, because ultimately there are a business of people and self-interest and other aspects that go into that ETF. Now, the next component I want to talk about with ETFs is the holdings. If you go to any of these pages, so here is the State Street S&P 500 ETF, here is the Invesco QQQ ETF, you can find the holdings of these specific ETFs right on their homepage. So actually now I'm on the S&P 500 ETF. It's called SPY. Or if I go back to the iShares ETF, IWM, here's the holdings. But the whole point is these pages, they look different. They're different companies, but they ultimately all do the same thing. They have to be transparent. They have to share with investors what they actually hold and why. So in this example, we can see what the top holdings in the SPY ETF are. And if we want to get the full list, there's even a download link here that we can add into an Excel spreadsheet. Now I do want to go back to the iShares page, the IWM page, because this is a little bit more of a detailed breakdown. And now I want to walk you through what some of the thought process might be for deciding if you actually want to buy this ETF or not. So let's say, for example, you want to buy this ETF, but you go down to the holdings and you look at its top holdings. Now, its first top holding is Super Microcomputers. It's got over $1 billion into this stock. Nearly 2% of the entire fund is invested into this single company. So the first thing you have to ask is, do you want to allocate that much money to this company? What do you know about this company? Do you agree with it? Do you like the product? Have you heard of it before? Have you looked at the financials? You got to ask yourself these things. Otherwise, what's the point of dumping your money into the fund if you don't agree with it? You're just blindly trusting it or what someone else says. I don't think that's ever the wisest decision in any type of business transaction that you embark on in your life. Another interesting thing is there's a symbol here that says MSTR or MicroStrategy. They have over $500 million invested into MicroStrategy. It is nearly 1% of the entire portfolio. Now, MicroStrategy is fairly fascinating. And the reason why MicroStrategy is fairly fascinating is because they are one of the largest Bitcoin holding companies on planet Earth today. In fact, you can see that MicroStrategy owns 214,000 Bitcoins. The amount of Bitcoin that they hold is worth $7.5 billion. And in addition, they have paid an average price of $35,000 per Bitcoin. Now, I'm not saying any of this is bad. I like crypto, but I am not buying this ETF to get exposure to crypto. If I'm going to buy Bitcoin, I'm going to go buy it myself. I'm going to store it in my cold wallet. I want the actual Bitcoin in my hands. So this alone makes this ETF even more confusing. Nearly 1% of the portfolio is already in Bitcoin, but I already hold Bitcoin off to the side in another sort of my own account that I manage. I'm not going near this then. I don't need any more Bitcoin. I have more than enough. But the point here is to walk you through the thought process that you must go through with each of these ETFs. In addition, MicroStrategy did not just buy this Bitcoin out of nowhere. They have taken out more than $3.5 billion in debt to buy the majority of this Bitcoin. So this also means that 1% of the fund is not only in a Bitcoin company, but also in a company that does hold significant debt. Now, the point here that I'm really trying to make and communicate is get to these ETF pages and look into the actual holdings to decide if you want to hold these or not. Because by looking at the holdings, you'll learn if it's for you. Looking at the company and who the people are, you'll learn if it's for you. Now, let's talk about the aspect of some of these ETFs just deceiving people. That's the word to use, deceiving. So I have done a search here. I ended up on a website. This website is showing me the best ESG ETFs. So ESG stands for Environmental Social Governance. This is sort of a way of saying, wow, this ETF holds companies that think about the planet or that think about people and think about doing good-spirited things. Nothing wrong with that. In fact, that's probably healthy. We should be watching out for each other. Let's help the environment. But this is just so interesting because the best ESG funds are all listed here. Well, I went ahead and I decided to look at what they rank as the best ESG fund, ESGV. Turns out it's Vanguard. So I did this process. I went to the Vanguard page and I found here, well, let's see, are you a financial professional? Just browsing. By the way, that's so interesting. They're definitely collecting data to try to probably sell more ETFs, get more information. It's just amazing how people just forget how much money there is in financial markets, all the data they're trying to collect. But that's another point. The point here is I'm on the ESG US stock ETF. So if I end up on an ETF like this, I'm expecting to see some really unique companies that stand out above the rest in what they do for the environment, social causes, governance causes. Like, they should just be the top line. They are, this is just how the company's positioned. It's in the founder's DNA. It's the company doesn't pollute, all that stuff. Okay, well, let's go look at the holdings. In fact, what's rather interesting is they may not even show the holdings as clearly as we want, because they probably know just how deceptive it all is. So let's keep going down until we can find the holdings. So this is actually hilarious. They're not even showing us the holdings at this point. They're just telling us the market cap, some data about the size of the companies, the number of companies they hold, the PE ratio. Okay, we finally get to the holdings. All right, so this is the ESG fund, and please tell me if these companies strike you as ESG. Are these the companies that are ESG? 7.5% of the entire fund is in Microsoft. 6.5% of the entire fund is in Apple. 5% of the entire fund is in NVIDIA. 3.9% of the entire fund is in Amazon. 2.4% is in Meta, Alphabet, Eli Lilly, Broadcom, JP Morgan Chase. So some 20% of the entire fund is in a whole bunch of mega corporations that I have no idea how they're ESG. I mean, you tell me which of these companies is ESG, or even better, why wouldn't you just buy the S&P 500 ETF? What is different about these holdings compared to, say, the S&P 500 ETF? So now here are the S&P 500 ETFs. Look at the holdings. Microsoft, Apple, NVIDIA, Amazon, Alphabet, Meta, Alphabet, Berkshire, Eli Lilly, Broadcom. Okay, let's go back to the ESG ETF. Microsoft, Apple, NVIDIA, Amazon, Meta, Alphabet, Eli Lilly, Broadcom. This is kind of bewildering, but it's fascinating because all these companies are doing is using the title of the ETF, the slogan, the catchy phrase, to appeal to people to gather more funds and to ultimately take a fee from such funds. There is nothing here that screams ESG. It's almost a mimic of the S&P 500 ETF. Now, I'm not saying they're not allowed to do this. I'm not saying this is incorrect or I don't agree with it. But I am saying that it is definitely worth your time to research, because I think if more people looked into these ETFs and their actual holdings and the actual people and the actual companies, they would realize that it doesn't really make as much sense as they initially thought to just plow their money into it, let them take a fee, and to think that you're holding some fancy asset of sorts, because it's generally just the complete opposite. Now, as I wind down this video, I've gone through who owns it, check the fees, check the holdings. I do want to talk about knowing the assets under management. I also did in this video cover the aspect of comparing and contrasting what the ETF says it is, what it says its name is, and its actual holdings. In this ESG example, I think that there's probably a breakdown between its title and the way it's marketing itself and the way it's selling investors and what it actually holds and stands behind. I definitely see a rather large disconnect there. But now, to end the video, I do want to talk about the concept of knowing the AUM, or assets under management, because the AUM tells you just how many people have plowed their money into this ETF, and you can sort of see where you fit in. So, for example, in this ETF, you can see that it has some, net assets. It looks at about 8 billion. So net assets for ESGV, 8 billion. So you can look into how much money is into this ETF, generally right there on the page. In the IWM example, we can also go back here and we can see, let's see some fun facts. Does it say net assets? 60 billion. So this is a massive fund as well. Now you can look at your account size and sort of see, like, where do I fit in? Am I a big player here? A small player here? Do I just want to go with the crowd in this regard? Is the more money better for me because it's liquid, it's got activity, maybe that means a lot of people have looked into it, it's popular? These are some key questions you want to ask yourself. And it's really up to you to decide what you want. Do you want low fees? Do you want popular funds? Do you want tons of assets in that fund so you're sort of surrounded by a large volume of money and assets, or you're looking for something a little more unique? Now, I'm going to make a future video on how to find new and interesting ETFs and how to utilize ETFs in your personal strategy, but this video was all about the key topics to getting started with ETFs so that less people sort of get deceived or make some bad decisions or buy something that they may not even fully agree with. Because that's part of it after all. When you put your money into these funds, you are essentially committing your money to them for a long period of time. And you have to ask yourself if that is the company for you. Do you like the management team? Do you like the people? Is it in line with what you believe in? And that is sort of going to guide whether or not you buy the fund. That's at least my opinion. You can do what you want with this. It's always for education and research. Thanks so much for watching.